From Kern Government Television, welcome to this week's Kern County Board of Supervisors meeting, originating from the County Administrative Center located at 1115 Truxtun Avenue, Bakersfield, California. Kern County's vision is to create and maintain a customer-centered county government designed to garner the confidence, support, and trust of the people we serve. Today's Kern County Board of Supervisors meeting will convene momentarily.
Board to reconvene. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Supervisor Peters.
Here.
Supervisor Scribner.
Here.
Supervisor Maggard.
Here.
Supervisor Couch.
Here.
Supervisor Perez.
Good morning and welcome to the Tuesday, October 12th of the Kern County Board of Supervisors. We'll begin today's meeting with a flag salute led by Romeo Aguilar. Following the Pledge of Allegiance, please stay standing for a moment of prayer, silence, or meditation, whichever you prefer.
Good morning. Salute and pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, I would like to call on Nick Colin, Director of the Animal Services Department, to introduce our Pet of the Week.
Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. How's it going?
It's going good. This pup that I got, that's probably slightly too heavy for me to be carrying. And he's frightened right now.
Got a handful with you.
This is Jeffrey. Jeffrey's about a 3-year-old. We're calling him a terrier mix, but he's got those Rottweiler characteristics in his face. But he's a super sweet dog, even though he's side eyeballing you there, Chairman Peters. He's a good boy. He's got an injured back leg, so he's available for adoption, but he's going to require a medical disclosure just for somebody to be aware that he has an injury. But he's a super cool dog, going to make somebody a good house pet.
Yeah, I saw him running around back there with Margot. He looks like a sweet dog.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks for bringing him down.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll begin by considering the consent agenda. All items listed with the CA above the items are considered to be routine and non-controversial by county staff. Consent items will be considered first and may be approved by one motion. If a member of the public wishes to comment or ask questions regarding an item on the consent agenda, they may do so prior to a vote being taken. Members of the board may remove any item from the consent agenda and it will be considered in listed sequence with an opportunity for any member of the public to address the board concerning the item before action is taken. Members of the public may also comment on any closed session item. At this time, I will read the consent agenda item numbers. That is items 2 through 4 and 7 through 8 on page 2, 9 through 16 on page 3, 17 through 20 on page 4, 26 through 31 on page 5, 32 through 39 on page 6, 40 through 45 on page 7, 46 and 48 through 52 on page 8, and lastly items 53 through 55 on page 9. Is there anyone in attendance that would like to speak regarding the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, would any members of the board like an item removed for discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I will abstain from the following consent calendar items due to a conflict. My wife works for Adventist Health, and so I'm going to recuse myself from item 50 on this agenda. Madam Clerk, please record my abstention on this item, even though I will vote on the motion to approve the consent calendar agenda. My vote will be just for those remaining items. Thank you.
Motion on consent.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, please cast your votes.
The motion is approved. All ayes.
Okay, the board will now hear item number 1, proclaiming October 2021 as Farmer and Farm Worker Appreciation Month in Kern County.
Motion on the proclamation.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second? Second.
The motion is approved. All ayes.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Board, Mr. Chairman, and board members. I don't know how you adequately express how important farming and farm workers are to our community, but we're going to attempt to do it in a small way this morning by proclaiming October 21st as Farmer and Farm Worker Appreciation Month in Kern County, and this recognition has been entered into our official board minutes signed by our Honorable Chairman Philip Peters. It's dated today, October 12th, 2021. We have a couple of people here with us, actually 3, and I want to introduce them. We're going to go in order like this? Okay. So first is, they're all familiar faces to you, but first is Romeo Agbalog. Next will be Patty Poire. They're both representing the Kern County Farm Bureau. And lastly would be Diana Malero. She's representing the California Farm Worker Foundation. So Romeo, I'll present this to you on behalf of all 3 of them, all 3 of you, I guess, and take it away.
Thank you, Supervisor Couch. Good morning, Honorable Chairman, distinguished members of the board. On behalf of the Kern County Farm Bureau, we'd like to thank you for recognizing the significance of agriculture here in Kern County and the contributions that agriculture provides, not just to our local economy, but our state economy, national economy, and the world. So with that, I just want to say thank you again. And at this point in time, I'd like to bring up our newly minted board president, Patty Poire.
Thank you, Supervisors. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, all the other members of the county staff that I know so well and I've enjoyed working with and look forward to continuing that. Agriculture, where do you begin? It's been our life. It's been what we grew up with. It's been in our communities from the very beginning. As we move forward, we want to continue to strive to do the best we can do, as we found out we could during the COVID pandemic. Kern County right now is the only county that has showed an increase in our production of agricultural products during the pandemic. So we have strived to develop and move forward and continue to provide what our country needed at that time, and we look forward to continuing that as we move forward. So I want to thank you also, because we could not do it without of our employees and our people that work with us in ag. So your staff works with us, supervisors, you work with us, so we all appreciate that relationship. And as the first female president of the Kern County Farm Bureau, I look for our relationship to continue to grow as we move forward as well. So thank you for this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Diana Malero, and I'm here on behalf of the California Farm Worker Foundation, also known as CFF. And on behalf of CFF, we want to thank the Kern County Board of Supervisors for the recognizing October as Farmer and Farm Worker Month, honoring the hands that produce more than 2/3 of the country's fruits and nuts that are grown here in Kern County. We thank you for recognizing the hard work and the dedication of providing a safe, nutritious, and food supply that is worthy of our gratitude each and every day. Lastly, I want to thank you for believing and supporting in our community and agricultural community specifically, celebrating the contributions for our health, our well-being, and because of farmers and farm workers, we get to live a healthy and sustainable life. I'm also here representing today a note by the California Grown, and on behalf of them, this is their remark. The California Grown is thrilled that Kern County has joined our call to the public to recognize that agriculture community, not just throughout the pandemic, but on the ongoing basis. As consumers get their focus from the food source and the people that produce it, they'll recognize the efforts in our farmers, our ranchers, and farm workers they put into our nation daily. With the Golden State producing over 50% of the nation's produce, it is our hope that people across the U.S. become fans of our growers and support the domestic food system at large. That note came on behalf of the California Grown. Thank you.
Thank you.
We've got your fancy proclamation.
Thank you. Okay, the board will now consider item number 5, public presentations. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons to address the board on any matter not on this agenda but under the jurisdiction of the board. Board members may respond briefly to statements made or questions posed. They may ask questions for clarification, make referrals to staff for factual information, or request staff to report back to the board at a later meeting. Also, the board may take action to direct staff to place a matter of business on a future agenda. Speakers are limited to 2 minutes. Please state and spell your name before making your presentation.
Good morning, Chairman Peters, Board of Supervisors. My name is Francisco Martinez. I'm an 18-year county worker, a CPS worker, SEIU 521 member, and a constituent of District 2. In the last month, I'm basically going to try to explain to you why the county's proposal is not good for social services. The last month, I've seen a training video, I've seen a CPS newsletter, and I sent an email by upper management. Basically, they're disclosing there is a problem with unfilled vacancies, and they're working on it. So in my opinion, it's just kind of a shout out to us, you guys. We know it's, your caseload it's high, and we're trying to fill the vacancies. Right now, there's a memo sent out. I'm just kind of explaining to you with the internal stuff, why we're in the situation. There's a memo sent out a couple of weeks ago asking an employment social service worker, hey, do you want to transfer to CPS? And as of today, I'm hearing no takers. And I just found out from my employment social service worker associate, we're having a problem, keeping our workers, So we're having a problem keeping our employment social service worker. Why is anyone going to go to CPS? I'm just kind of giving a little idea why I'm in this situation. And I understand some board of supervisors have kind of reached out trying to understand why is the proposal bad. And I understand your council's basically said, stop talking. So I proposed something. Maybe you guys can just talk to workers and the departments to kind of explain. We won't talk about the bargaining negotiations. Let us just have a Zoom meeting or come and talk about why we're in this situation. Because obviously if you talk to our department heads, they're paid to kind of state, we're providing the services, the resources allocated, and, paid to give stiff upper lip. So I understand that. But anyways, meet with us. We won't talk about negotiating and bargaining. Just talk about our work. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we have our next speaker, please?
Good morning. My name is Ann Walker, ANNWALKER. I'm a nurse with the Public Health Department. I've been there for 24 years. I'm a voter who live in Representative Scribner's district. I am here to lend my voice to the last, best, and final offer presented to me and my fellow county employees represented by SEIU 521 and ask that you do better by your employees. During my time with public health, I have worked with and continue to work with a lot of hardworking, dedicated, and committed employees. I have watched firsthand over the last 18 months the time and effort staff has put in to get help us get through this pandemic. Every time we receive a request, it's answered. We go above and beyond the call. We continue to work evenings and weekends to make sure all our programs are ran smoothly. When I came to public health all those years ago, nurses enjoyed working for the department and wanted to spend their career working for the county. For the past 5+ years, it's been a different story. We have seen a hemorrhaging of nurses. As soon as one comes in, another 1 or 2 leaves. We need a strong public health core to deal with disasters, and nurses are a key part of that. But if we continue on this trajectory, Kern County may fail to meet the needs of the community during this next crisis. The reason for this hemorrhaging of nurses and other positions is due to the low wages we are paid. We cannot hire and retain staff due to this. With the current offer on the table, it is still not enough for us to retain current staff or hire new ones. I'm suggesting that your team go back to the bargaining table and do better. Do better for the dedicated, hardworking employees of this county who have hung in there for the past 14 years without a COLA, because if you don't do better, we all may leave for something better. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. Could we have our next speaker, please?
Good morning. My name is Janine Adams. That's JeaninneAdams. I'm an appraiser, too, at the Kern County Assessor's Office. I live in Tehachapi and vote in District 2. Although we learned June 30th that Kern County has its highest ever property tax roll, in other words, the highest revenue due to property taxes ever, fiscal policies of this board continue to hold departments to merciless, cumulative cuts, up to 25% implemented over the last years. How can public services not be affected by 25% cut? As a member of the Kern County Assessor's appraisal staff and as a concerned member of this community, I'm speaking out against these devastating, relentless cuts. Comparison of the Kern County Assessor's Office budget versus Assessor's Office serving similarly sized counties, such as Ventura County and San Luis Obispo, are stark. Budgets for Ventura and San Luis Obispo have increased over the last year, yet the Kern County budget has been cut by 25%. This in spite of the fact that Kern County processes more transactions and more assessment evaluation appeals than either of these two counties. These cuts are not only affect the ability of the Kern County Assessor's Office to prepare our tax roll in a timely manner, it affects our ability to defend our tax valuations, which are continually under attack from corporate interests. The most concerning issue out of all of this is that members of this board, with the exception of David Couch, have refused to meet with Kern County employees to fully understand the cuts and the impacts that they have. After my last public comment, May 11th, 5 months ago, Supervisor Perez asked that I contact her office for more information. I still have not received a date to discuss these important issues. I've contacted my own supervisor, Supervisor Scrivener, District 2, yet there's no time in their busy schedule to meet with me. I'm asking this board to listen to their employees and their constituents. We deserve your time, just like the time you provide big corporate interests that support your political careers. Thank you.
Could we have our next speaker, please?
Good morning. My name is Tabitha Lyons, Tabathalyons. I work at Kern Medical. I've been there for 11 years. I work in the psychiatric department. I am here to urge the Board of Supervisors to save an award-winning and life-saving Kern Medical Pharmacy from closing its doors to the patients in our district. I want to point out some of the reasons why we value the pharmacy. I work with the pharmacy to prepare deliveries for medications to be delivered to our department when a patient is scheduled to be discharged. Some of the patients we have, if given scripts to get their medications themselves, will not. And they cannot because they don't have the resources to get them themselves. Our pharmacy program, Meds to Beds, cannot be found anywhere else, and it has been proven in educational articles that our staff and the program cut down the readmission rates. Also, with having a pharmacy on campus, our patients can walk away from the hospital to get their meds within walking distance. Also, for the behavioral health unit where I work, we have to have medications with the patients when they are discharged because the patient's discharged to a new facility where they have to have their meds with them. Sometimes we only get an hour notice of the patient being discharged, and our pharmacy uses Meds to Beds to get it to us on time. My question is to you, where is the behavioral health going to get the medications when the patient is being discharged? My other question to you is, how long will it take for a patient to be discharged when we can't get the medication on time? Because our patients have to be there at a specific time or they lose the bed that they're reserved for. Thank you. And again, I urge the Board of Supervisors to come together and save an award-winning and life-saving pharmacy from closing its doors to patients in your district. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, morning. My name is Yuridia Lopez. Y-U-R-I-R-I-A-L-O-P-E-C. Right now, I'm not prepared to speak English, and my partner translate me. Ok, yo estoy aquí, soy promotor comunitario de Visión y Compromiso y estamos unidos con unas organizaciones, Unidad Benito Juárez, Líder Concil, Faith de Bali, entre otras. Nosotros apoyamos a la comunidad haciendo canvassing, outreach, door to door, llevándole la información sobre el condado de Kern para apoyarlos con el pago de la renta y los biles.
I am a promotora from Visión y Compromiso, and we are here united with Leadership Council, Faith in the Valley, and Unidad Popular Benito Juárez. We are out doing canvassing, going door to door, and doing outreach on the rental assistance program.
En este momento nosotros estamos aquí porque se les ha dado se quiere dar los recursos a la gente, pero no les ha llegado. A la comunidad se está viendo afectada. Todos sabemos que por el COVID se perdieron recursos, se perdió trabajo, horas de empleo y no pueden pagar su casa y están en riesgo muchísimas familias de las comunidades del condado de Kern en perder su casa.
We are here because we know that you want to provide the funds to the community, but the funds are not getting to the hands of the folks who are facing hardships in paying their rent. They are, because of the pandemic, we all know that we face economic hardships, and there's folks who are at risk of losing their homes.
Tenemos muchos casos a los que les hemos apoyado a llenar las aplicaciones, se han llevado al condado de Kern, pero los procesos han quedado sin darles los recursos, no les han dado los recursos a muchas de las personas y lo que nosotros les queremos pedir es que nos apoyen a que el proceso sea más ágil, que se cumplen con los requisitos, pero al final de cuentas o la aplicación no llegó al destinatario final al que le tiene que dar el apoyo o la aplicación fue denegada porque la dirección no era la correcta según ellos y la carta llegó muy tarde o el tiempo que dieron para la respuesta de un documento no fue el adecuado.
We have helped various community members with their cases, and we have submitted the applications on their behalf, but the process is taking too long, and the funding isn't coming to the community members. Folks are being denied because apparently the addresses are not correct on the applications and that they're not being reached out to. And by the time that they get the denial letter, it's too late for them to do an appeal process.
Por último, quiero nada más llegar a ustedes que nos den el apoyo necesario para nuestras comunidades. Son familias con niños que corren el riesgo de quedar sin casa y lo que pedimos es que exista cuando ya se lleve a evicción el proceso, que nos ayuden a que una persona como nosotros les llene la aplicación y que se entienda que en ese momento él está en la necesidad, va a perder su casa y que se les pueda ayudar y se les haga el proceso ágil.
Finally, we are asking for your support to ensure that the process is fast enough and that folks are receiving the funds, and also ensure that there's a staff person or community-based organization there at the court to support residents with completing an application should they be facing evictions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good morning. My name is Emma de la Rosa, Policy Advocate with Leadership Council. So The eviction moratorium ensured that folks who were not able to pay their rent due to the hardships of the pandemic were able to stay housed. The federal government responded by providing millions of dollars to the county and to the city to provide rental and utility assistance. We are now here asking you to please respond to the need to expedite the rental assistance process. We've worked with staff, and staff has been responsive to our emails. However, we are still hearing residents who have applied since March and still have not received the funds. That is a way too long of a process. Now that the eviction moratorium is over, we cannot wait 5-6 months. Folks need to receive the funds, and we know landlords are also anxious to receive their rent as well. This is a program that benefits everyone, including you. We want to make sure that the funds are out. As Yudi mentioned, we are also asking that a staff member be placed at the courts, whether it be at the beginning when folks are maybe going into to file a UD, and to ensure that they are providing them with the resources to apply for the rental assistance program, or during the day of court, that there be a staff person there to facilitate that rental assistance process for both the tenant and the landlords to ensure that they get the funding. We also are asking that the denial process be accompanied by a phone call in the preferred language of the tenant who applied. A lot of folks are not getting calls, or they're getting letters in English and not in Spanish or in the preferred language. And so, it makes it difficult for folks to be able to respond and provide the adequate information that they're missing, if they are missing information, or to be able to go through the appeal process. We just saw that there's an article that the rents are soaring, that the vacancy rates are low. We know there's a housing issue. You are going to be talking about the homelessness ordinance later today. This is a way to prevent homelessness. We want to make sure that the funds get to community members. Please, please, please ensure that you're providing oversight of the program, and maybe perhaps including it as an agenda item every month to ensure that there's monitoring of the funds, and also ensuring that the funds are being distributed equitably throughout the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Ovio, would you like to?
Thank you. Lorelei Oviatt, Director of Planning and Natural Resources. I'm very interested in these comments. It's been brought to my attention. Besides the funding that the CAO has provided, the Planning Department, through our federal and state money, is providing this. This was brought to my attention of 2.5 weeks ago. There is a problem. With your direction, I would like to assist the CAO. I am digging into what kinds of requests are they making? What kinds of paperwork are they asking for? We have come up against these types of issues before a few years ago when we were doing that. Perhaps we're asking for too much. Perhaps we're not being clear. But we are going to move this money, or we're going to lose it. So besides the fact that we have people who are in need, we have people who are not being reached. So I would like to let you know that I'll be working on this with your direction, with your support. And I am very interested in finding out from the people who spoke today and the others who are in the field, what do they see as changes we can make? We have been meeting with CAPK, and we will be reaching out to the Housing Authority.
Thank you, Supervisor Perez.
Lorelei, thank you for coming up to the microphone. I appreciate it. I was concerned at the rollout of some of the first rental assistance. We talked about this, that what is the sort of portal by which people can realistically and in a user-friendly way access information that is relevant and timely, because it is the first step. It is the only step that really matters. We have, lots of opportunities once that first step is made, right? So we talked about potentially funneling this through the 211 process, right? Just like every other, right, assistance that folks that are not as connected to the system as some other folks are, for whatever reason, that we talked about the 211 process. It also seems, I think we have to revamp that, Lorelei, because people don't know where to go. An 800 number or a 7-digit number is this completely unrealistic. When you're talking about people in a state of panic and in a global pandemic, I mean, it's just unrealistic. Lorelei, the other piece is with the courts. You have people at various stages of the process, right? Evicting somebody is quite a process that involves lots of money, the courts, lots of disgruntled players, right? I mean, it's a nasty process. But that is certainly the last stage of when, as De La Rosa says, somebody is right on the edge of becoming homeless, adding to our homeless crisis, right? Only adding to more problems that we have. We haven't even really addressed them in a meaningful way, and certainly we're trying. But it seems like the courts, the judges, I don't know that we need a staff member inside of a courtroom. If the judges are aware of the program and they're aware that we have an alternative or a resolution for both renter and owner, I mean, it seems like the bench is the smartest place to catch, right, people when they are most vulnerable to becoming homeless. It would be, these Cap K and these other folks have lots of bodies to get the word out in terms of being at the courthouse, getting people at the initial stages of the process of being evicted. But the judges would, I think, love to know about this, and they sit and talk very openly for resolutions with both sides, because they want to resolve it too, right? When we want to resolve it as quickly and cheaply as possible. It seems like they're a great partner at the last stage of the process in the court system. We really should engage them. I know Colette Humphrey and others on the bench would be just thrilled. Our probation chief, of course, works very closely with that bench there. So I just think there's something to be done there, but we've got to change that 211. We got to change it and move it into the 211 system, because what we have is unrealistic, bureaucratic, and it's just not working. I really appreciate you bringing up these concerns. I don't know that we have a bunch of staff to put places. I mean, we are struggling to retain staff in our current departments. That's what I honestly believe. But you have a lot of staff, and your staff, I think, is much more flexible. But it seems to me the 211 system, the bench, would really speed this process along and save a lot of heartache. So I would love to be a part of that, Lorelei. With you at the helm, I mean, it would really be magic. So if there's something I can do, please let me know. But this is a mess. And the 211 system and the involvement of the bench should resolve this.
Supervisor Perez, to the chair, I appreciate that. I would include, anyone who has good ideas. I will tell you that one of the, I was not actually involved, besides, awarding this money. But I can tell you that in past programs, one of the things that develops is that the grantees are obsessed with the monitoring and the accountability that we need to do. And sometimes that gets in the way of delivering the services. And we have been very successful with some other programs at helping take away some of that bureaucratic overload. In other words, worrying about, well, if I get an audit, will I be able to account for this pen, can get in the way of actually getting the pen to the people who need it. So we're going to be re-examining that with the Housing Authority, with the permission of the CAO who has given that money, as well as the money that we've given to Cap K. And let's see if we can loosen this up. Let's see if we can add more types of support, and we do have some more funding. So let's see if we can revamp this and move this money, because we are actually in danger of losing the money as well as depriving the people who need it of this funding. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Could we have our next speaker, please?
Hector Hernandez, Good morning, everybody. My name is Hector Hernandez. I'm here to speak on behalf of other people that speak other native languages. I'm also here to speak on behalf of the farm workers communities. You guys are talking about, we're talking about the rental assistance, and this is a big problem. We've been helping the communities for the past 5-6 months, and we have submitted applications for the past 5-6 months. And a lot of the applications that we submitted for folks in the communities have not been processed, have not been moved around. Mrs. Perez, you're talking about 211. I'm sorry, it's not going to work, because if you live in Taft, 211 goes to Santa Barbara. The numbers jumps to the satellite that goes to Santa Barbara. And 211 doesn't work because our farm workers are working during 8 to 5, and they're not going to stop working to make a call in the middle of the work, because they're in the middle of the field. Sometimes if they're working all the way in Arvin to Wasco, somewhere where there's no service, there's no assistance for the communities.
So a call that's available on Sundays would be key.
Sundays and afternoons. I know you guys' hours is from 8 to 5. Our people, they don't get home till 5, 6, 7 o'clock in the afternoon. We have agencies
but
like
a weekend line would help.
Okay, there's a lot of ways we can work.
Thank
But you have the agencies, you have the organizations here, you have Unidad Popular, Faith in the Valley, Leadership Council, Visión y Compromiso, and others. They're doing the work. This is the trusted communities organizations that people can come to us and relate to us with their problems. And you still go back to the same system without realizing that our community needs those service in the communities. They live in Wasco, Shafter, all over the county. And by the time they get home and to come to Bakersfield to go and apply with the housing authorities or make the 211 call, it doesn't work in our communities. Unfortunately, Kern County is one of the largest agriculture communities. You know, we have farm workers, they're traveling from all over Kern County and other counties to do work. And if you're still relying on a system that from 8 to 5 and a 211 number, in our community it doesn't work. And that's why we're here, because not only we're frustrated with the system, we're frustrated because there's no service coming to our communities. And we're talking about worrying about having more homeless. We're not talking about just adults. We're talking about kids, families, complete families being out of house. And we need this service to be processed in a way that the community can work with that. You know, if you keep on doing 8 to 5, our folks and families, they're not going to stop working to see if they can process an application, to see if everything's going to go through or not, because our families, they need to work every day.
Is anybody, thank you, Chairman. Is anybody out in the community like with a computer and helping people get through the application?
We got a contract through Visión y Compromiso with Unidad Popular, Faith in the Valley, Leadership Council. We got 4 or 5 people in the communities in Arvin, others in Lamont, others in Bakersfield. They're going around every single day in the communities. The problem is not getting the application to the housing authorities. The problem is getting a process from housing authorities. We're submitting applications in Spanish, and we're getting letters from housing authorities in English. People don't understand, they don't know how to read English. And so when they get those letters, they get denied because they're not responding, they're not submitting their pay stubs, or if they're requesting a contract. Some of the first applications that we submitted, they were getting denied just for the simple fact that they didn't have an email, which it didn't make sense. We were getting the pay stubs, the contracts, all the information of where they live and all that, but we weren't getting through with none of that.
Well, maybe housing authority wasn't the right way to go through this. It sounds terribly bureaucratic and ineffective. But I don't know more details, and this is not the appropriate place. I'm sorry, but I appreciate you answering my questions. I'm going to get with the housing authority right away, and your insight is so helpful.
Okay.
So thank you.
I would ask that just the last comment. I will ask for you guys to put it into your agenda to see how we can change this process, because it's not working. It's not working. We're out there in the communities. We have people in the communities. We're doing vaccine events almost every week. And we have people submitting applications during that, helping out with application during the vaccine events. But the problem is that it doesn't matter how much work we're doing, the housing authority is not doing anything. The process is we got applications that were submitted in April, and we had a couple of families that got letters in September. I mean, even welfare and other departments in the county, the process is way faster than the housing authorities. And that's where we're getting frustrated, because we got families that got infected, got families that they had to stop working because of the pandemic. The kids had to stay home and all this other stuff. So all that created chaos in the families. So we're asking the Board of Supervisors to take action, make something, but make something that's going to work for our communities, not for you guys, because the need is for the communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we have our next speaker, please? Okay, seeing none, we will now consider item number 6, board member announcements or reports. And I'd like to begin by inviting Kern County Director of Public Health, Bryn Kerrigan, to give an update on the COVID pandemic.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. On August 28th, Kern County's 7-day average case rate peaked during the third surge at 43.6 per 100,000 people. Today, it is 24.3. On September 1st, Kern County's 7-day testing positivity rate peaked during the third surge at 9.9%. Today, it's 8.3%. On September 13th, Kern County's COVID-19 hospitalizations peaked with 336 hospitalizations, and our COVID-related ICUs peaked on October 3rd with 80 ICU patients. As of yesterday, we had 243 COVID-related hospitalizations with still 80 in the ICU. As of yesterday, Kern County's hospital system had 218 staffable available regular hospital beds and 18 staffable available ICU beds. Kern County's ICU capacity is at 8.9%, and the San Joaquin Regional ICU capacity is at 11.7%. As of yesterday, 4 of our 243 hospitalized COVID patients are residents from outside of Kern County. As of yesterday, 816,510 doses of the COVID-19 vaccine have been administered to Kern County residents. 390,541, or 51.8% of Kern's eligible population, has been fully vaccinated against COVID-19. Another 70,901 people have 1 dose of their 2-dose series, meaning 61.2% of Kern's eligible population is at least partially vaccinated. 71.3% of our 65 and older population is fully vaccinated, and 38.4% of our 12 to 17-year-old population is fully vaccinated. According to California Department of Public Health, unvaccinated Californians are 7.1 times more likely to get COVID-19 than fully vaccinated Californians, and unvaccinated Californians are 17.4 times more likely to die from COVID-19 than fully vaccinated Californians. Kern's average daily case rate over the past 14 days is 24.64. Our vaccinated average daily case rate is 2.88, while our unvaccinated average daily case rate is 39.45. Over the last 14 days, 95.33% of our cases were amongst those who are unvaccinated. Since January 21st, Kern County has had 49,817 cases, with 48,594, or 97.55%, being amongst those who are unvaccinated, and 1,223, or 2.45%, being amongst those who are fully vaccinated. 0.32% of our fully vaccinated population has tested positive for COVID-19. During the same time period, we have had 2,165 COVID-related hospitalizations. 2,117, or 97.78%, were in those who are unvaccinated, and 48, or 2.22%, being in those who are vaccinated. 0.013% of our vaccinated population has been hospitalized for COVID-19. We have identified 940 individuals who have tested positive more than 90 days from their initial positive test. This equates to 0.66% of our residents who have had COVID-19 that have been reinfected, as compared to 0.32% of our vaccinated population who have had a post-vaccination infection. There have been 121 individuals who have been reinfected with COVID-19 who were hospitalized during one or more of their COVID-19 illnesses. 41 were only hospitalized during their first infection, 54 were only hospitalized during their second infection, and 26 were hospitalized during both infections. Those who were hospitalized during their second infection or following development of some level of natural immunity totals 80, or 0.056% of Kern's population who has had COVID-19. For comparison, 0.013% of the vaccinated population has been hospitalized. Both Moderna and Johnson & Johnson have submitted requests for emergency use authorization of booster shots of their COVID-19 vaccines. The FDA is convening a meeting with its panel of advisors this week to review the data. Boosters for these vaccines may be available as early as the end of this month. Additionally, late last week, Pfizer submitted a request to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration for authorization of the COVID-19 vaccine in children ages 5 to 11. An FDA advisory committee is scheduled to meet and discuss authorization on October 26th. Kern's 5 to 11 population is estimated to be 99,526 people. In order to ensure sufficient capacity for the vaccine booster and for the likely upcoming authorization of vaccination in 5 to 11-year-olds, our department is launching a scaled-down mass vaccination clinic, which opens today. This will be a short-term clinic providing vaccinations through the end of the calendar year. The vaccination clinic will operate Tuesday through Friday from 10:30 to 6 p.m. in the Harvest Hall at Kern County Fairgrounds. Walk-ins are welcome. However, we encourage appointments as the process is quicker with an appointment. To schedule an appointment, visit myturn.ca.gov. This week, the state-sponsored monoclonal site opened in Kern County. The site is located at 1111 Columbus Avenue. This site can provide up to 25 treatments per day and is free of cost. Information about this treatment site and monoclonal treatments can be found on our website at kernpublichealth.com. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Kerrigan?
Great presentation, thank you.
Thank you.
Supervisor Maggard?
Thank you. Is the effort still underway to deliver vaccines to farm workers in the field?
Yes, sir. We still have 4 contracted mobile vaccination units that we tried to connect with host sites to provide vaccination in areas convenient for our community.
How effective is that?
It's still working. We're still vaccinating at those sites. So it's still worthy of us continuing that effort.
Very good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you.
Thanks.
Are there any other reports or referrals from the board?
In general, for board member announcements? Yes, I do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Supervisor Perez.
2 things, actually. I would like to address the what felt like an accusation earlier that my office had not communicated. And I discovered from my staff that we have actually had multiple emails, and that the conclusion was because you're in negotiations, we cannot discuss details of the negotiations with you. So for the benefit of the public, I want you to know that my staff doesn't ignore anyone. And when we tell people we're going to contact you, we do. Sometimes the solution looks differently than what you would like, and that's always frustrating, and I don't blame your frustration. But we cannot discuss negotiations. It's illegal, and it will thwart the entire process. I like the suggestion made today that if we can come out and just talk to people, not about the conditions of the contract, I am totally open to that. But I want you to know that that's actually what happened between my staff as I discovered it in the few moments after I heard the presentation. And that's always upsetting because we don't want to neglect anybody ever. And my staff does an excellent job of communicating. So I want to thank my staff, but also thank the information and the sense that you feel ignored. I know that's separate than technicalities, and I don't want you to. So I want you to know we want to come out, we will listen and talk about things not related to the contract negotiation, but obviously we can't violate the law. Thank you, and I appreciate your graciousness. Secondly, Ryan, what do we do about the problem at the Housing Authority? This is a serious problem. Do we need a referral? Do we call the Housing Authority here for next agenda? What would you recommend, Ryan?
Yeah, Supervisor Perez, members of the board. Yeah, I don't know how serious a problem it is. I think
the
that
public is telling us, Ryan, how serious it is.
So there's a lot of money that's been provided for rental assistance and utility assistance. That money has been given to the Housing Authority to run that program and to get the money out. Money's going out to people. There are clearly deficits in the process. Even if it's 2 people or 3 people or whatever it is, 20 people, I think it's worthy of looking into, sitting down with the Housing Authority, figuring things out. I do think that it may be good to have the Housing Authority come before the board to explain the process. We can have a big presentation and provide, we can get into the weeds on everything they've done or have not done to date. To give you a sense, walk you through the process. And I think before we do that, I guess that's in a couple of weeks, I will put a meeting together and I will invite the Housing Authority. Thank you, Lorelei, for your volunteering to be involved with this. I'll invite Ms. De La Rosa and whoever she'd like to bring. And we'll sit down and talk about some of these issues. And the gentleman that spoke before, I can't remember your name, sir, but you're more than welcome to come. And if you give me your number before you leave, I'll be happy to call you. So the idea would be to put together that group, really get a sense of some of the issues, and hopefully by the time we have the presentation to your board on this program, where things stand, how things are working. Maybe we've got some time to do some adjustments so that we're ahead of the game. But we want to make sure this works, and it's not, knowing just government in general and my own navigation of my own life. There are all sorts of problems in government at every single level, so I do not want to argue that there are no problems here. It's highly likely that there are, and we want to get this money out. We want to get it out to everybody, and we want to make that as easy as possible. So that'll be our endeavor. We'll have the meeting. We'll come back and give you a full report, and hopefully that is good for you, Supervisor.
Ryan, I really appreciate you. Emma, when you get with Lorelei and our CEO and whoever is appropriate, probably not a huge group, that's not terribly productive, but maybe you and another person, we can hammer this out with the Housing Authority and move and make the adjustments and make a good presentation here. I want to thank you for being here and with such great passion and articulation, help us understand what the problem is. That's what the point of these board sessions are, and I appreciate your openness, Ryan. Chairman, thank you. And Lorelei, of course, let's fix this. Thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor Perez. Any other questions or reports or referrals from the board? Okay, seeing none, we will now consider items 21 through 23 under the CAO's office. These will be heard concurrently and then voted on separately. Each item is a proposed agreement for fire protection services and enforcement of state fire marshal regulations by the Kern County Fire Department. Item 21 is with the City of Delano, item 22 is with the City of Shafter, and item 23 is with the City of Wasco. And for that, I will turn to our Fire Chief, or Mr. Zervis. So I don't know, which one of you want to take the
I'll get started.
You got it.
Thank you, Chairman Peters and members of the board. We're here today to present to you three new fire contracts with three of our contract cities. As a reminder, back on January 9th of 2018, your board received a report from the Center for Public Safety Management on a variety of really a comprehensive operational administrative analysis of the Kern County Fire Department, and it listed several recommendations and findings on adjustments that they recommended, one of which was to move to 100% full cost recovery for contract fire services. At the time, it was estimated by CPSM that the reimbursement rate was about 48%. After that, your board contracted with an Adelson Dale group who produced a report on June 30th and presented it to your board. That's June 30th of 2020, analyzing this issue further and making a recommendation on a full cost recovery methodology in order to get to 100% cost recovery. Your board took action on that report on November 10th of 2020 and gave direction to staff on a couple points, one of which was to align all of the existing contracts with contract fire cities to expire next June 30th. Most of them were set up to do that, and there were a couple outliers, and so we did some extensions and notices to align those. And then to start negotiating within the parameters of the Adelson Dale Group study with the contract cities and try to come together on a methodology and contract terms that were acceptable to all of the parties. Over the past 11 months, the fire chief and I have been working pretty extensively with all of our contract cities on that effort. And there's been several back and forths and adjustments in kind of how we actually apply the methodology in real life and how we do that in a way that both fits within the parameters that the board had directed us and was equitable to the cities and the county. And I'm really pleased to report to your board that through that collaborative effort that we really ended up with a product that is consistent with the board's action and is in the process of approval by almost all of the contract cities. So the first three cities have actually approved the contract, and that's Delano and Shafter and Wasco. And in September, those city councils approved those contracts with unanimous votes. And so those contracts we're bringing to your board. What it means to the Kern County Fire Department is by full implementation, once there's a 5-year or 6-year phase-in period for the new full cost recovery. But just for these 3 contracts, this would provide an extra $1.62 million annually to the Kern County Fire Department. And over the term of these contracts, just these 3 will generate $4.8 million in additional revenue for the Kern County Fire Department. So we're pleased that we were able to do this in a way that we were able to partner with our cities and address some operational issues. And I think the fire chief will be able to speak to that. But they're all. What we heard unanimously from all of our customer cities or contract cities is that they love the service. It was never about the service. The community really values Kern Fire and the services that are provided. It was really an issue of understanding cost and the cost of providing that service and addressing some of their other concerns. We were able to do that, and we're really pleased to be able to bring to you today the first 3 of those contracts for your consideration. With that, I'll be available for any questions, and I'll turn it over to the chief in case he has anything to add.
Good morning, supervisors, chairman. I just want to echo the comments that Mr. Zervis said. In speaking with all the city managers, they've all echoed those same comments, that they believe that the Kern County Fire Department provides an excellent service, top-notch firefighters. They all want to stay with the Kern County Fire Department. And all our talks have been very educational, very positive, and I believe our talks have provided a stronger relationship with our contract cities. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Duncan and Mr. Zervis. Are there any questions from the board? Nope. All right. Thank you very much. So next we'll go to public comment. Is there anyone in attendance that would like to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve item 21, and that is the Delano contract.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes.
The motion is approved. All ayes.
Okay, thank you. Next is item 22, the Shafter contract. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
The motion is approved. All ayes.
Okay, and lastly, we have the item 23, the Wasco contract. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion is approved. All ayes.
All right. Thank you very much. Yes, sir, Supervisor Cow.
Can I just mention that all 4 of those were in the 4th District, and I want to pass along my thanks to the not only to you all and your staffs, but also the staffs of each of those 3 cities. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. Okay, next is item 24 under the CAO's office, a report on a multi-departmental strategic action plan to reduce homelessness and mitigate impacts on public safety and quality of life. And for that, I will turn it over to our CAO, Ryan Alsop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Today, we're going to provide your board with an extensive multi-department strategic plan that builds on the county's existing efforts to reduce homelessness and mitigate its impact on public safety and quality of life. Over the past year, there's been quite a bit of work that's been done by our community, whether that has been the reorganization of the Bakersfield-Kern Regional Homeless Collaborative, building up a professional staff for the first time ever in that organization, bringing 3 low-barrier navigation centers online, 2 offering up to 300 temporary beds. Obviously, one of those was done by the city, one by the county, and the other one out in Delano with the county and Flood Ministries, which is day use. We've seen an expansion of beds and facilities at the Bakersfield Homeless Center and the mission of Kern County, and just yesterday attended the really great groundbreaking at the mission, who opened a new transitional housing facility for women and children over on China Grade Loop. It's a phenomenal building, and congratulate the mission for that work. Your board's also approved and directed millions of dollars in state homeless service grants to local provider networks. And we've also seen a significant ramp up and effort put forward by the largest city in the county, Bakersfield, city of Bakersfield, whose efforts in the fight against homelessness are clearly evident and I think working, and we have a good collaboration with the city. So today, really this is about continuing the evolution in dealing with homelessness in our community, all of the significant challenges that issue brings to bear, not just for the people who are dealing with life on the streets, who are addicted or have mental health problems or all of the above, but it's also dealing with a lot of the quality of life issues that people living and working here deal with related to that challenge, and it's very real. So with that, we've got, I think, several people that are going to participate, but I'm going to kick it over to Mr. Zerfas to provide a quick overview before, I think, introducing Ms. Kuwahara from Behavioral Health.
Thank you, Ryan. Chairman Peters and members of the board. As Mr. Alsop had indicated, this is a multi-department strategic action plan, really building on efforts that are already in place. So, it is it's in part responsive to Supervisor Maggard's referral on June 29th regarding an ordinance that the City of Los Angeles had been considering restricting the activities surrounding encampments. And asked the county to take a look at that. As we took a look at that, really, we took a step back and said, what are all of these factors? What are all of these activities that we need to address? Because simply having an ordinance doesn't necessarily solve the problem. How are we going to bring aid to those that are suffering in the streets? How are we going to deal with the impacts on the community in a comprehensive way that will be effectual? And that was really the challenge. And so we gathered a large group of county departments that anyone that really touched this area was at the table to talk about different efforts we could move forward with, as well as several of our key partners in this effort, whether it's CAP-K or Flood Ministries or the Homeless Collaborative. We really sought to include them in this discussion and make sure we were thinking about it in a comprehensive way. In a way that can try to bring some relief to the issue. So it is more than just an ordinance. This is a comprehensive suite of activities, building on a base of what we've already been doing. And it's aimed to help those that are really struggling in homeless, that have proven to be the most hard to reach in our community. And while doing so, to also mitigate those impacts on public safety and quality of life in Kern County. And so that's really what this package that we're presenting to you today is. It is for receive and file. It's to let you know the things that we're working on. These will likely come before you individually. Some are in play already. Others will come before you for specific action in the future as they get closer to launching. This package is really a 4-year effort. So we're looking at how do we invest with some of our one-time resources in a way to try to address this issue and bring help to those in need. We have a 4-year plan to do that with these activities. It's not exhaustive. This is where we're starting. We understand we're going to learn a lot as we're implementing these different things, and we're going to adjust, and we're going to look at the data and see what's working, and we're going to adjust where needed in order to be effectual in this effort. And this is going to start, a lot of these activities, as you'll hear, really start centered around the Bakersfield metro area just because of the large population of homeless within this area, but it's not exclusive in this area. And we'll be looking to strategically to expand that effort into other parts of the county as needed based on data and based on where the needs are. So although we may be talking about some things that are kind of centered in Bakersfield Metro, we're certainly not exclusive in that effort, and we'll be we already are looking at doing things in other parts of the county, and these efforts will translate into those other parts of the county as well. So I'd like to just touch first on the ordinance. Actually, the next item on your agenda, you'll actually consider the ordinance separately, but it is a part of this overall effort, and it's related to the other things we're talking about. So County Council and CAO and our group reviewed the Los Angeles ordinance. We also reviewed several other local government ordinances aimed at the same type of activities. County Council reviewed the applicable court cases and laws and what was allowable, and then we talked about what would work in Kern County, and how do we translate this into something that we think meets the best practice, is legal and enforceable, and addresses our unique issues in Kern County. And the draft ordinance that's being proposed in your next item, we think does that. And so a couple just points as to what that ordinance does. It will prohibit camping, lying, and living in public areas such as streets, alleys, doorways, public parking lots, parks, where it impacts pedestrian and vehicle movement. It will prohibit camping and sitting and lying down within 500 feet of a school or library. It also prohibits camping and sitting and lying within 10 feet of a public sidewalk adjacent to a residential property. So if someone's in front of a home, it would prohibit that. It establishes a process for enforcement of the ordinance and a notice process so that we can go out and make contact and notice and get things cleaned up, because it doesn't just prohibit the act of camping, but actually the setting up of personal property, campsites, encampments, those types of activities. So there's a notice and a process involved for removing those items. There's also a process in the ordinance for preserving personal property that is taken during that time, and that would be preserved for 90 days. And then there is a process to connect the homeless individuals to shelter spaces that are available, and to services. So it's not just about going out and cleaning up the area, although that's one aspect of it, but it is about reaching out, making contact, connecting people with services so that they can get help. And it actually, the ordinance does preclude enforcement of the ordinance unless there's appropriate shelter space available for somewhere to go. So those are kind of some high-level aspects of the ordinance. We can talk a little more detail about that now or in the next item when we consider that separately. So having an ordinance really brings the next step of how are we going to enforce the ordinance? How are we going to go about doing that? And we've got two different approaches that are included in this effort. The first is public works-based code enforcement, rapid response teams. So we are looking at creating two rapid response teams through code enforcement. And those teams, they would be tasked with enforcing the ordinance and providing a pathway to reduce the risk to homeless individuals living on the street and in the general public. The goal of this effort really is to reduce the hazards that exist within these unmanaged encampments. So you'd have two teams of code enforcement officers that would be dispatched to deal with those folks in the public right-of-way in particular. They may also notice private property owners if there are violations going on private property, but that's really outside the scope of this ordinance. This ordinance is particular to public rights-of-way, and so this team would be the ones enforcing that within that space. They would also partner with our co-response teams, our behavioral health roam teams, illegal dumping cleanup crews, park rangers, and sheriffs in this effort, but this would be their primary task. In addition to that, we have two teams through general services that would partner maintenance workers with rangers to carry out similar activities on county property. So what we're talking about here are county parks, and county properties such as libraries, or this facility, for example, where those rangers have authority to enforce, and we have our property to maintain and to keep clean and to provide services to the public, whether it's recreation in a park setting or here. And so We would have two rapid response teams through general services, through our park rangers and maintenance teams. They would be tasked to enforce the ordinance within, and other laws within our own properties, and to clean and remove encampments, trash, rubbish, and debris. Again, dealing with these types of hazards to public health and quality of life that are impacting our community, and also, again, connecting those that are experiencing homelessness, those that are out in this situation, connecting them to the appropriate services in partnership with some of the other efforts that we're talking about here. The third item that we're focused on is increasing our available shelter space. So in the Bakersfield metro area, there are currently 4 different main shelters. So that's the M Street Navigation Center, the Brundage Lane Navigation Center, the Bakersfield Homeless Center, and the Mission at Kern County. All of those provide services and space to the homeless population at large, and many of them have kind of unique characteristics that appeal to certain demographics within the homeless population. And we recognize that there really are a variety of unique circumstances that keep individuals from accepting help. In the shelters, they don't go for one reason or another, and there's a variety of reasons why they choose not to go into a shelter situation and accept help. And so we see this as an opportunity to expand our offering and to be able to give different options to folks that may not be ready to go into a congregate setting like those other shelters. And this really may be a way to better connect those experiencing homelessness ultimately with service providers and folks that can bring them the help that they need. And in this effort, there are 2 main activities we're focused on. The first is safe parking and camping. So at the M Street Navigation Center, when that was put together initially, a safe parking area was planned and approved for homeless individuals transitioning off the streets but not yet ready for shelter. That was envisioned from the beginning, and it just hasn't been implemented for a variety of reasons. But now that we're up and running and we're managing through the pandemic, we see an opportunity to make that available for folks. This space would be available for both homeless individuals residing in their vehicles and those sleeping outdoors. We will have basic wraparound services provided to people that are in this situation, but the goal is really to connect them to M Street. So once we have them there, we can get them connected with service providers. We can have behavioral health on site. We can get them some basic needs met, but get them into the homeless management system, understand who they are, and try to get them transitioned ultimately into a congregate setting or into permanent supportive housing. So it's a space where folks that may not be ready to go into a managed care facility would maybe be willing to relocate their encampment to a space that we can have security at, we can have lights, we can have video cameras, that we can make sure it's a safe environment for them to be in and provide them some basic services while we build trust and build a relationship with them in order to get them further along into a better, more stable environment for them and safe environment. That's a safe parking and camping option. The second component for increasing our space or options here is a tiny home project that the county's exploring. This would be a project with 30 to 50. They are double occupancy, 8x8 kind of prefabbed shelters. A team of us went down to Los Angeles and toured a couple facilities already, spoke with some service providers to understand operationally how that functions, and we're fairly impressed with what we saw and can see a need for that here for folks that for whatever reason, maybe they've got trauma and they're not able to function in a congregate setting. This gives them a safe space that maybe we can get them off the street into a non-congregate setting like the tiny home facility, and be able to bring them these services. This is not a permanent housing solution. This is not the kind of tiny home that is self-sufficient, meaning it has a kitchen and a bathroom. This is simply a two beds and little air conditioning unit and a heater. They're certainly, they're nice, but it's not a permanent housing solution. In that facility, they have common laundry facilities. You bring food in, and there's an administrative role, and there's security, and much like M Street, it's a very managed environment. So you have folks providing services in there, and all of those wraparound services exist. We are exploring different locations for this right now, so we don't have a specific location, but we'll be reporting back to your board as we kind of flesh out those ideas and how we can move that project forward. We do see that tiny home as a missing component within the different types of shelter space that we have to offer here currently. So we're exploring that option currently. Our next category in kind of activities that we're moving forward with in this area really surrounds homeless engagement. And I'm going to turn it over to Stacy Kuahara, your Director of Behavioral Health, to speak about the next 3 or 4 items in this space. So.
Good morning, Chairman Peters, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to come and share how Kern Behavioral Health and Recovery Services is partnering to support our county solutions to address homelessness. I'd really like to share my appreciation to our CAO, Mr. Alsop, for supporting our efforts in homelessness, recognizing the impact of mental health, substance use, and how they impact this issue, and inviting us to be a partner to find some solutions. Kern BHRS is proposing 2 new pilot programs to support the needs we identified by our current homeless outreach efforts. The first pilot is a joint project with Kern BHRS and the Bakersfield Police Department. We'll be establishing up to 4 co-response teams, partnering a behavioral health worker with an officer to provide homeless outreach, looking to fill the gaps that we've currently identified through our existing outreach work. The co-response team will be dispatched to provide welfare calls for homeless individuals. They'll be using the relational model to interact with homeless individuals on the street and support our existing efforts to move homeless individuals toward treatment and housing. The co-response teams will provide crisis interventions. They can complete 5150 evaluations for homeless individuals and can support communities and businesses experiencing challenges due to homeless. This pilot will start by adding 2 co-response teams in the first year and building to add 2 more in the second year. The pilot will also add 1 conservator through Aging and Adult Services, recognizing how essential that this area of need has been in our effort when we identify homeless individuals who are determined to need an even higher level of ongoing long-term care. Our second pilot plans to add 4 mental health staff to work specifically with the Kern County Sheriff's Office, assigning mobile evaluation team units specific to KCSO. The goal of the mobile evaluation unit additions is to reduce response times to the welfare calls by increasing the availability of our team to respond to KCSO on all of their calls, and especially related to homeless response and homeless needs. The proposal seeks to add 2 staff in the first year and 2 more in year 2. Our intention with KCSO will be to identify our communities that are often underserved by both mobile evaluation team and increasing homeless needs. So by evaluating call volume and needs identified through dispatch for these outlying communities, we can determine if a specific assignment of a MET worker to provide both crisis response and homeless outreach will be justified. Combining these efforts potentially support better utilization of a MET unit, and we'll be partnering with KCSO to determine where those assignments should initiate. Kern BHRS services outreach, our outreach activities have increased significantly at the beginning of this year. with the development of the Rome team, our behavioral health team that works alongside Flood Ministries, providing outreach specific to homeless individuals having high behavioral health needs. Our program, this model, has been very successful in helping homeless individuals get connected to both housing and treatment. We wanted to continue to build on this success, and so we are applying for innovation funding through the Mental Health Services Act to support this team, adding a full-time psychiatrist and funding 2 mobile units that will support the ongoing efforts for the team in the community. So we anticipate these 2 new pilot programs will really be a very specific enhancement and fill some current gaps for the services that we've identified through our homeless outreach in the Rome team and working with Flood Ministries. I'm really appreciative that the county recognizes and supports the impacts of mental health and substance use and is supporting these pilots, enabling us to establish new and innovative programs to find solutions for this countywide problem. That concludes my portion, and I'll give it back to Mr. Zervis.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Peters and members of the board, just to kind of wrap this up. So we've got a whole package here of new activities that the county's engaging in or expansion of existing efforts in this space to try to make an impact on the homelessness issue, to deal with the quality of life concerns and the public safety concerns surrounding encampments, and to try to reach and connect folks experiencing homelessness that have been reluctant in the past to engage with service providers to get help. The cost for the county's portion outside of the Rome team expansion, this is about an $8.3 million investment for the county in these activities. This is being funded through our allocation of the American Rescue Plan Act funding, so ARPA, over the next 4-year period. And we're going to be tracking data. So we're going to be looking at what works. We're going to be grabbing different data points to be able to report back to your board on how effective it's being and where it's occurring. And so we're going to, we'll have plenty of transparency and data for you to look at and see how effective this is so that we can determine how we move forward as a county in addressing this complex problem. I'd like to just add, as I close, that there are several of our partners in this homeless space here with us today. And so they may want to address your board as well. This is more than just a CAO or behavioral health effort. Again, this is a strategic effort from all of your county departments as well as other providers within the community. So thank you, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Zervis. Supervisor Perez.
Thank you so much, Chairman. Jim, this is very exciting. Lorelei and I have been fantasizing about tiny houses for the homeless for about 3 years now. So I am just so pleased to see it into fruition. Jim, I was amazed by this homeless encampment that the city cleared out eventually on Union, right where the highway is, you may recall it. I was really amazed to learn that group of homeless folks, were their own community. They had elected officials, they had a mayor, they had somebody doing security. I'm dead serious, right? And I found this to be so profoundly enlightening and also really demonstrative of a huge gap between where we are in government, right? Where we are with people with, sort of living by normal rules, if you will, if there's such a thing, as opposed to folks who have to some degree checked out of that norm. There's a lot of danger associated with that, but there's a lot of opportunity associated with that too. And part of what is so exciting about the tiny houses, to me, is the opportunity to get to transition a group of people that are already a community, already kind of know each other, peer review, they know the strengths and weaknesses of each other. No group of human beings is equal. No 2 human beings are equal. So naturally, there's stratified authority and an opportunity there with a population that knows each other, right? They have kind of the same burned bridges, if you will, for lots of different complicated reasons. And I don't think we're going to resolve that. And certainly, we have people here, professionals trying to live in Kern County who cannot get housing themselves, right? Living in other places, living in hotels, and driving into work here. So the idea that we're going to house this population in a traditional way is ridiculous and an excuse for not actually taking action, right? Which is that we have a huge swath of our citizenry that, for a lot of reasons, some of them ours, just cannot get into regular housing. Some of that is how we build, the requirements to build in California. I mean, the list goes on and on. But nonetheless, we have a group of people that can function as an entity and in a unit, even if they're apart from their regular family members. And they've demonstrated that in multiple encampments. Again, lots of problems associated with not real oversight. But I believe there's a lot of potential with people to govern themselves when they have the right tools and government's not there hoarding over them, telling them how shameful their lives are. That is completely useless, a waste of time, and it pushes people away from feeling like this is a hopeful trajectory upward. So, Jim, I want to again thank you for your consummate professionalism. You know, my staff loves you. Whenever you're talking, I get lots of nice text messages. My chief of staff just, I love to hear Jim talk. He is so good. And, you know, you should know that you are respected and admired by the county family, and that's not easy because we have a tough job. But I really think there's a lot of opportunity here, and I've seen some pilots out of Orange County and other places I think are really, really cutting edge on a homeless transition. And even though these aren't permanent housing, the fact that people can live individually, right, and not in a dorm room with their stuff 100 feet away with God knows who's going through it. It's just not, you know, it's just hard to move people in that circumstance. And I know we're doing the best we can, Jim, but I really feel like this is a meaningful transition and one in which we are looking at folks that are part of our community. They don't engage in the same rules the way we do, and that's their right. We are trying to manage that, right, in a civilized and otherwise moral society, and it's hard. But I think this is a real solution to dealing with a group of people that are checked out, for the most part, by the rules that we live by, but have a lot of opportunity to get stable, and many of them can be transitioned into permanent housing if we have this one step in place. That sort of, you know what I mean. But I just want to thank you and thank the county, the CAO's office for thinking big about these issues, because I think this is a real solution and one that and what we're doing with mental health. And Stacy Kuhara, she really is a bright light in the county, and I'm so excited by what you all are doing, and I want to thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Maggard.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that Mr. Tobias and Mr. Wheeler want to speak, and I'd be happy to speak after them.
Okay, you got it. Thanks. Okay, anybody like to come up for public comment? Now would be the time.
Good morning, Chairman Peters and fellow board members. I'm Jeremy Tobias, CEO of CAPK, Community Action Partnership of Kern, and I'm here as the operator of the M Street Navigation Center. I'd like to commend your board and staff, entire county staff, CAO's office, behavioral health, sheriff's department, all the county staff, top to bottom, on addressing this horribly complex issue that takes some big thinking and tireless and relentless work. I'm here to show support more specifically for the safe parking and camping component at the M Street Navigation Center. As Mr. Zervis mentioned, we had envisioned this a long time ago when we were first designing that center and putting it together, and we think now is the time to do it. We're ready to do it. CAPK staff and county staff and our partners with the other nonprofits are doing some exceptional work at the M Street Navigation Center and changing lives. And this is another step towards bringing people off the streets and into a better setting for themselves and for our community, to improve our community. So I'm here to show support for it. We're ready to do it. We think it's a great idea, and we're excited to implement it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and honorable members of the Board of Supervisors. Thank you for the opportunity to share some thoughts I have about this process. You know, I firmly believe that we cannot criminalize our way out of homelessness. So when I initially heard about this effort, I was a little bit dubious and a little bit cautious. I understand the issues that we have, the dilemma, the back and forth between quality of life issues and public safety issues, and also helping those people who really need our help and are on the streets. And so I was pleasantly surprised by the scope of the county's effort. And I want to thank Mr. Alsop especially for his leadership in sort of bringing everybody together and not just putting a Band-Aid on this issue, but coming up with something that was comprehensive and balanced. Because in addition to enforcement, which I believe we need enforcement, we need to incentivize people to make a change. But it also adds additional resources that are needed, and I'm thankful for that. I appreciate the efforts of Stacy, the sheriff, Jeremy Oliver from Aging and Adult Services, and Lorelei and her team, and especially the CAO's office. I think you guys have done a great job in putting a comprehensive plan together, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm especially excited about the efforts to do something different. You know, if you always do what you always done, you always get what you always got, right? And so they're trying some new approaches, and I'm very excited about the safe parking, and then the safe camping, the tiny homes, the work of creating the extra MET teams and the extra roam teams. We have folks who the traditional system are not going to help, right? They need sometimes they need a conservatorship. Sometimes they need extra housing that's, as Mr. Zervis mentioned, that's not appropriate for everybody else. And so I just want to thank the board for taking this issue of homelessness seriously. And I want to thank you for your support. And I look forward to seeing what kind of impact we can have on reducing homelessness in our community.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment?
Good morning, Chairman Peters, as well as the other Board of Supervisors. My name is Anna Lavin. I'm the Executive Director for the Bakersfield-Kern Regional Homeless Collaborative. I've had an opportunity to meet all of you. I also want to echo the comments that were just made, both by CAPK as well as Flood Ministries. Essentially, when we look at encampment and response, both at a local level and what we've seen nationally, what works best is a multidisciplinary approach. And that's exactly what's been crafted and what's been presented to you today. So what I really wanted to reinforce in my comments is that both we know that at the city, with Bakersfield City, they have implemented several of these types of strategies. They've been incredibly effective and very quickly so. So I think that you can have confidence both that we've seen some success already with some elements of the project that's been proposed, and also some very exciting work, particularly with behavioral health and recovery services. What I would reinforce is that I had an opportunity on Friday to do a ride-along with the Roam team. I would emphasize for our entire community what I was able to observe, which is an incredible sense of compassion and patience for some of the most challenging folks that we have in our community, behaviorally speaking. And I also had an opportunity to observe a 5150 in progress, BPPD. Again, that officer was the most compassionate, the most patient person I think I've seen in a very, very long time. And it was really, really, while it's very difficult to see someone with that level of illness and that level of distress, truthfully, it's fantastic to know that we have resources that have been brought to bear to address some of our most ill folks and those who need the most amount of assistance with achieving a sense of healing, a sense of safety in our community. So I wanted to just reiterate what I think some of the others have already said, which is essentially this. I think you can have a strong sense of confidence in this proposal. And essentially it's a full package. And it uses the kinds of best practices that have been used or demonstrated to be effective across the country. And it's really exciting to see that we're able to bring that here with our own local flair, as is always necessary. So thank you.
Thank you. Could we have our next speaker, please?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Board. I just want to thank you and Mr. Alsop, thank you for all your work for this package. I mean, when I saw this on Thursday of last week, I was very I was looking forward to it, and I read it many times over. I read it just now as well, again, just to make sure that I was on the right page with you folks. And this is well done, Mr. Alsop. Good job on this. I do believe I support this as the Mission of Kern County's Executive Director. I support it wholly. This is some really, really good steps to helping our less fortunate in our community. So thank you for all your work and for your heart to keep serving the community.
Thank you. Could we have our next speaker, please?
Good morning. It's wonderful to be here in person. Chair and members of the board, Christian Clegg, City Manager, City of Bakersfield. I've tuned in by phone before, but not in person yet, and so it's great to be here with you today. Just wanted to reflect the incredible partnership and collaboration that we've had with the county on this topic. Homelessness is issue number one for the city. I know in the metro area it's a huge challenge as well in unincorporated areas. And just want to again state how pleased we have been to work closely with county staff on this issue. We've taken a hard look at the different strategies that the county is bringing forward. We think that these are the right strategies. I think we all know that there isn't a silver bullet on this issue. And I can share from my perspective that the county is looking at all the best practices or promising practices that are out there today. There isn't something that's been left off the table for the county and the city in pursuing solutions around homelessness. We have been very pleased with our partnership as well with behavioral health services. They are an integral part of our navigation center. Project Rome is going really well, and we're excited about the initial results there. And we want to be part of the co-response model going forward. We've set aside dollars in our budget not only to assign officers to this project, but also to support from ARPA funds these same types of initiatives. And we've actually set aside ARPA funds for other potential regional homelessness solutions that we come up with over the next couple of years as well. We may find that there are other solutions going forward. We know that substance abuse is another remaining challenge that looms large and how to get at this issue. And so we've got funds set aside to continue to partner between city and county on this topic, and would just again close out by commending the county for doing really good work on this topic, and we're excited about this partnership.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello again, Emma de la Rosa, Policy Advocate with Leadership Council. According to the last point in time count, there are about 2,000 residents who are currently homeless, and that is a way bigger number than the available housing. I do want to recommend a different perspective to this issue, which is to conduct an evaluation of your housing element programs, which are in place to ensure that there's enough housing for all populations, including folks who are homeless. You can begin by enforcing the rezoning of the 199 acres that have not been currently rezoned to R3. You can also look into policy 5.1, which is to provide the appropriate regulatory framework, funding availability, and other necessary services for the creation of housing for persons with special needs, including large families, farm workers, elderly, persons with disabilities, single-parent families, and the homeless. We've reviewed the annual progress reports, and there isn't too much detail in there to really see whether or not it's been enforced and to the extent that it's been enforced and how it's actually been working out. So we recommend looking at that. Also looking at program 5.1.6, which is to continue to utilize the continuum of care to identify homeless needs and direct funds toward projects that effectively address those needs. I'm not sure if you've reviewed those, but maybe that's something else that could be considered. Also looking into program 5.1.7, which is to encourage developers to build rental housing for large families and farm workers by offering incentives such as density bonuses or fast-tracking priority processing. Of course, considering to which kind of funding the county has applied for in the past to ensure that it has the capacity to build and to serve the needs of the community members. We strongly recommend that approach rather than a punitive one to ensure that folks have housing, right? It's not just the shelters that are needed. I believe it was I read an article where the mission mentioned that there isn't enough affordable places for folks to go into right after they're out of the shelters. So are we looking at that as well as part of the issue? Because if we're not, then I highly strongly recommend that we look at the affordable housing development and look at how these programs can be implemented to ensure that the housing is there. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for any questions or comments. Supervisor Maggard.
I think Mr. Alsop would like to go first.
I appreciate that, Supervisor Maggard, through the chair. I just wanted to say thank you to everybody that has come up and for their comments, everybody. Appreciate Mr. Clegg from the city of Bakersfield being here. I just wanted to point out that this, and I got some thank yous, and and that comes with, I guess, my position. But this was really, to Mr. Zervis's point, a team effort. And we're sitting next to two members of the county council staff, the county council herself, members of her team. They worked on the ordinance. That was a Herculean effort. It was a lot of work. I know that they put into that. I want to thank everybody that participated: Aging and Adult Services, Behavioral Health, the sheriff himself with his top staff, and both the sheriff and undersheriff, frankly, together attended these meetings. So it was a big effort by a lot of different people in the county to come up with the presentation today. I just wanted to say that before your remarks. Thank you, Supervisor Maggard.
Thank you, Mr. Alsop. Supervisor Maggard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are those, even my friends like Mr. Wheeler, who think that their first reaction is that this is punitive. It is not punitive. The most cruel, the most uncaring, the most heartless response we can have is to do nothing. Imagine wandering the streets day and night, aimlessly, unaware of your surroundings, not knowing where to go, where to eat, in terror. That is the life of the mentally ill on our street. Nothing could be more cruel than we doom them to that living nightmare. That's why we're doing this. There are some in the homeless community that want help and want to get off the street. Many of those have moved into the hundreds of beds that we have supplied through our shelters. There are some who don't want to come off the streets and back into what we would call the regular part of society. And there are some who cannot comprehend how to get it done. So what this is not punitive. It is an effort to help those people, particularly those who are mentally ill, escape that living nightmare, and we must do that. There are others who say that we should not waste this money, or that we should not spend it on these people. Well, I think that's wrong. It is the only just thing to do to spend this money and to set up these programs. It's just unthinkable to me that we would not do anything. And if we don't do anything about this, the other reason I think it's just is that the very fabric of our culture, of our society, is unraveling. Look what we're walking around, driving around our community, seeing. As I passed through town a couple days ago, I saw 4 or 5 people that were completely splayed out on the sidewalk. You don't know if they're dead. You don't know if they're alive. You don't know if they're. You don't know anything about their condition, and it surrounds us all the time. Our culture is unraveling, so it is the only thing we can do. This is just this ordinance is just the first step in this process, the next step rather in this process, so I'll be supportive of that when we address that next. But I just wanted to emphasize that this is a very comprehensive program. At the outset, when Mr. Alsop and I were discussing this, I thought we needed the mental health component, but this is a quantum leap beyond that. It is everything we can imagine that we could have in this. So I'm very, very grateful. First, I want to say thank you to Stacey Kuhara. When we hired Ms. Kuhara, I had been told that there was nothing more we could do. I had been told that this issue couldn't be solved. And I asked her and stated to her how significant, how important this issue was to me. And she gave me her word that she would address it. She has embraced it and addressed it. So, Ms. Kuhara, thank you for doing that. You've done everything I hoped that you would do, and I'm grateful for your work in that regard. I also want to thank Mr. Alsop, Mr. Zervis, Mr. Tobias from CAPK, Mr. Wheeler from Flood. Those are our partners in this effort. I want to thank Christian Clegg for your outstanding leadership and your inclination to collaborate with us. Thank you for that, and all of our colleagues at the city, on the council, and the mayor for their efforts as well. So, Mr. Clegg, thank you for that. And Ms. Rezan, thank you for helping draft the ordinance. So I won't belabor this with more. It's a great program, and it has many elements that will be helpful to us in our effort to help these people and to kind of re-knit together the fabric of our culture. So, Mr. Chairman, that's it. And I would be happy to move to receive and file.
Thank you, Supervisor Maggard. Supervisor Scrivener.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll second the motion to receive and file, absolutely. I do have a couple of questions. So first, I want to echo the comments from Supervisor Maggard, thanking our staff and also our community partners who will be engaging in this with us. This is a tremendous plan that you put together, and there are many positive components to it. I do acknowledge, though, that this is going to represent an expenditure of a tremendous amount of funds in order to tackle it. And so I appreciated, Mr. Zervis, your comments about having transparency and tracking the data, because we need to ensure that as we're spending money that we're seeing an ROI, return on that investment. And so how often could this board expect to have staff come back with reports on the efficacy of these efforts?
Supervisor Scrivener, through the chair, we can be prepared to come back, as often as you like. Quite frankly, it's my intent to have real-time data capturing as we go through this process. So, and different components as they launch, we'll have data to report back to you. So I would say, give us a couple months and we'll come back and show you kind of where we're at, and then we can, determine a more regular reporting schedule. But we'll make sure, especially, we'll make sure to do that on a regular basis.
Thank you. I'd like to see something quarterly, if that works out, if come back in a couple months, and if we could do something quarterly. This issue, as everyone acknowledges, is at the height of the public's level of concern, and rightly so. We're all impacted by homelessness in our communities, and this leads me to my next question. Obviously, homelessness is a bigger issue in the metro area. That's where we see the largest concentrations of individuals, particularly our downtown Bakersfield area. However, there's homelessness that I see in my district from Boron to Taft. And so the community partners that we've all discussed, from the city of Bakersfield to the navigation centers, et cetera, are all centered in the metro area. And so as we move forward, what are the plans for us to get outreach into those outlying areas of the county? We're 8,200 square miles, and so even though you won't see as many homeless individuals, I still see them camped out in public spaces in those small unincorporated communities of the county. So I'm looking at Mr. Zervis, but I'm open to anyone answering the question.
I'll try to answer your question, Supervisor Scrivener, through the chair, and maybe I'll ask Ms. Kuahara to finish. You bring up a good point. The population, the heaviest, the homeless populations are heaviest in the metro area, as we all know. Doesn't mean that there's not there aren't problems in other communities across our county, and it's quite a big county. There are efforts underway working with providers with mental health, with others to address some of those issues in outlying areas, places beyond the Metro Bakersfield area. This particular plan, while most heavily focused, at least initially, in the metro area, is really meant to be an effort, a pilot effort to see what's working, what's not, and to launch from there into other areas, take it on the road, and apply it in other areas, take what's working, clip away what's not. That'll be done through this process that we're going to be reporting back to you, and I think that's a really good suggestion, and thank you for asking about it. Ms. Guahar, you.
Certainly, thank you. Supervisor Scribner, through the chair. A couple things that I'd like to say on this. When we put the Roam team out on the street and really got their feedback on what they were seeing and what their barriers and challenges were, it really highlighted and directed a lot of our partnerships and the way we engage and what we advocated for in terms of what we thought was needed for this package. And after hearing other conversations today about different matters, I think the same applies when you look at our outlying communities. We have very different communities in East Kern, Kern River Valley than we do in West Kern, and they have different needs, and they need to probably be approached a little bit uniquely. And so I think that that's a very important conversation that we have and go forward, and I think it's important to understand those communities, the demographics, and what their homeless needs are. For us, where we are excited to start is with the KCSO partnership and our mobile evaluation team. We have heard for a long time that they wanted additional MET units in person, providing responses in some of our outlying communities, and I just didn't have the call volume to support a full-time staff out there. And so what we're looking at doing is, I think when you combine crisis calls and homeless outreach together, I can probably support assignments in those areas by expanding some of the outreach efforts that we're doing and the response. So we'll look forward to working with KCSO, looking at their call volume, looking at what those community needs are, and then determining and using our pilot with KCSO to address some of that.
Thank you. And I am okay with us concentrating initially in the metro for obvious reasons, but as we do so, honing our approach, seeing what works and what doesn't. And as you come back and report to us, whether it's in 2 months or when we start going on a quarterly basis on looking at all our data points, et cetera, that we continue to have some discussion of what's occurring in the outlying areas so we don't lose sight of the problem that does exist, whether it's as big or not as the metro area, notwithstanding. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Scribner. Supervisor Couch.
Thank you. First of all, I apologize for the way I sound. The dust and the wind yesterday destroyed me. I want you to, whether it's Jim or Mr. Alsop, to speak to one particular portion of this. When we look at, and it's kind of following up on what Supervisor Maggard said, when we look at the homeless population, and you have some people that are clearly suffering mental health problems, and you have some people that are, for whatever reason, you have some people in there, and I don't know what these percentages might be, that are probably drug users, probably committing crimes, but not suffering mental health issues other than the effects of drug use. And they just don't want the help either. I was hopeful that this ordinance that we're going to talk about in a moment would sort of be a way of saying, okay, we've got a place for you to go, but we can't make you go there. We can't incentivize you enough to go there unless we can take you to jail. And this ordinance, under the penalty, we're not allowed to do that. So can you comment? I know we're going to get criticized for that. So can you comment on the case law or whatever has caused us to have this just be an infraction? What all the issues in the ordinance that are not jailable offenses? I'm not sure if I'm using the right word, but you know where I'm heading with that.
Supervisor Couch, through the chair, it is illegal to criminalize homelessness.
Well, now, but we're going to get criticized because I thought it was, you could take someone, doesn't matter if they're homeless, if they're sleeping on the street would be the crime, not being homeless.
Right, so sleeping has been recognized by the courts as if a person is sleeping in the open on the street because they have no other place to go, you can't criminalize that act. However, there are still all the laws and the rules related to trespass and loitering and nuisance. And all of those laws, some of which carry criminal penalties, are still available for law enforcement and agencies to use. So there's still, depending on a person's activity, if there is a report of, an encampment, and law enforcement, and Ms. Kuwahara can also speak to this as well as I see that the sheriffs are back there. Should law enforcement respond and there is criminal activity occurring, that individual or those individuals can be taken into custody, cited, depending on the nature of the criminal activity, arrested.
Depending on the amount of drugs they have on them, depending on the amount of stolen merchandise they might have on them, it might not be, but it could be.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Couch. Any other questions, comments?
Mr. Alsop will raise his hand. Can I recognize him to jump in there? Thank you.
At the risk of bunging up an excellent answer by County Council, I just wanted to give you my 2 cents on this, Supervisor Couch. I know where you're going. I think looking at this plan in its entirety, because I think each element, in addition to the ordinance, each element subsequent to that Mr. Zervis walked through, they all sort of blend together, right? It's all kind of a working plan, and I view each one of those elements as a tool. The ordinance itself is a tool that we don't currently have. I think that it is a tool of, and I'm trying to find a word, of disruption, and I'm using that in the most positive sense. A disruption from the status quo, providing a tool for our team, our MET team, expansions, Rome team, co-response teams, to provide a disruption for people who are more likely than not probably in a position doing great harm to themselves or potentially others. There are a whole slew of different things happening at an encampment. It runs the gamut. You can have people say, yeah, I didn't know that there was a place to go. I didn't know that you had a shelter. Please take me there. From somebody saying, I'm not going anywhere. Now we have a tool to say, well, you got to go somewhere, and we actually have some alternatives for you, and we're happy to bring services around you to help you get there and put you there, whether it's an overnight spot in your car or camping, or whether it's at M Street or any one of the other shelters that we've got. I think it's a broad scope of circumstances. But if you look at this ordinance as a tool that we currently don't have to utilize, I think it gives us some ability to, again, provide some disruption that ultimately leads to better outcomes for these folks, one way or the other. On the law enforcement side, I'm not the sheriff and I'm not the police chief, but I think that if anytime there's a law enforcement engagement with any individual that may be on the streets, and if there's something that's being done, I would say beyond just camping, right? If there's drug use or they find a weapon or something like that, and I think that kind of crosses the line, and then they would take whatever action they take. But really looking at this as one of several tools to provide a disruption to the current status quo, ultimately to get these folks into help.
Thank you, Mr. Alsop. Supervisor Perez.
Thank you. I want to say real quickly, number one factor to reduce recidivism scientifically is voter registration, as interesting as that may sound. Please keep that in mind. And the larger criminogenic factor, more than substance abuse, and even mental health issues, which we know are very prevalent in society. And substance abuse in particular amongst all classes, we don't have to pretend. But specifically is an antisocial perspective of the world. And that is, I think, really fundamental to this conversation. We cannot continue to treat people as if they do not belong in our society and then want them to join society. It just doesn't work with human beings anywhere, at any society, at any place on the globe. So I appreciate the perspective, and not just compassion, it's about effectiveness and managing and measuring where we're spending the taxpayer's dollar, right? And when folks get registered to vote and they feel like they're a part of society, and you can get as far away from this antisocial mentality as possible, because once you're antisocial, that totally dominates substance abuse. So it will overcome even one's own sense of values or morals, because they have checked out from that way of being, and they have a new metaphysic now, which is sort of anything goes. That is so problematic on so many levels. And I don't expect that folks are going to become doctors through this process. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I don't think they need to be. They need to be productive and, have some measurable level of upward trajectory. And voter registration, antisocial mentality are the most fundamental keys. Please remember that, Jim, because, folks need to be a part of society and be building it in an upwardly mobile way. And of course, there are expectations, but you get my point, Jim. Thanks.
I'd just like to add that I know homelessness is an extremely challenging issue, not just for the people going through it, but also for the impacts it has on public safety. I've seen a lot of issues downtown with some of the business owners I've spoken to that have gone through impacts at their businesses. I mean, the whole community is impacted by it. So thank you, everybody that's participated in this, for these efforts. I think it's going to be a good deterrent and help us to combat this. But I would just like to emphasize Supervisor Scrivener's point about keeping in mind some of these outlying areas like the Kern River Valley, Ridgecrest, and Kern in my district. They have definitely been impacted by homelessness, and I know, as Ms. Kuahara said, that response might need to look different in these different areas than it will in Metro Bakersfield. But just if we could kind of keep an eye and a mind toward shifting or including these outlying areas in our efforts, that would be greatly appreciated. So are there any other comments or questions before we cast our votes? We already have a motion and a second. Okay. If not, please go ahead and cast your votes.
The motion is approved. All ayes.
Thank you. Okay, our next item is item 25 under the CAO's office, a request to set a hearing on proposed ordinance adding Chapter 8.30 to Title 8 of the Kern County Ordinance Code to specify the times and locations where it shall be unlawful for a person to camp or place personal effects in public areas. And I'll turn it back over to Brian Alsop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is we're continuing the discussion. This item deals with the ordinance. This is a partnership here, and I think both we're going to have Mr. Zervis, I think, lead in, and then with comments from County Council.
Thank you, Chairman Peters and members of the board. This is really a follow-up item to what we were just speaking about with regards to homelessness. And what we're asking today is that the board introduce and waive the reading of the proposed ordinance and set a public hearing for November 9th, 2021 at 9 a.m. to consider adoption of the proposed ordinance. I just want to walk through the bullet points on page 2 of your board letter to be really clear as to what's included in this ordinance, because I think Mr. Alsop accurately, described this as disruption. It's not criminalization, as Supervisor Couch pointed out. It doesn't carry a penalty of going to jail, but it does allow authority to go in and disrupt activities, in particular surrounding the encampments. And so walking through these items, the proposed ordinance includes the following main provisions. The first, it would prohibit camping, sitting, or lying down with the intent to camp in public areas such as streets, sidewalks, alleys, doorways, entrances to buildings, public parking lots, parks, underpasses, riverbeds, bike paths, and open spaces in such a way to obstruct vehicular, traffic, and pedestrian access required under the American with Disabilities Act. The second item is that it would prohibit camping, sitting, or lying down with the intent to camp within 500 feet of a fence, entrance, or exit of a public or private K-12 school. So anywhere within the vicinity of the schools, that behavior or that activity is prohibited. It would prohibit camping, sitting, lying down with the intent to camp within 500 feet of an entrance or exit to a public library or facility that provides housing, shelter, supportive services, or storage to homeless persons. So again, a restriction on that activity. And finally, it restricts camping, sitting, or lying down within 10 feet of a public sidewalk or curb adjacent to a residentially zoned property, with the exception of a property owner, exception of the property owner or with that property owner's permission. So it restricts this activity of, excuse me, camping, sitting, or lying down in these specific areas. I would note that in the first bullet point, it specifically references where it disrupts, obstructs vehicular traffic or pedestrian access. So this doesn't say you can't sit or lie down in a park, but it says you can't sit or lie down in the sidewalk. So there's a nuance there that allows for activities that are normal within our society that we don't want to prohibit, versus the types of things where you're under an overpass or in a street or sidewalk. The fifth bullet point prohibits the storage, use, maintenance, or placement of personal property in public areas such as sidewalks, streets, alleys, doorways, entrances to buildings, public parking lots, parks, underpasses, riverbeds, bike paths, or open spaces. So this is where we get into encampments. This is the prohibit the storage, use, or maintenance of personal property. So if you're setting up a tent, if you're setting up a camping stove, if you just have your shopping cart and your stuff, those things are not allowed to be maintained or used or placed within these public areas. The ordinance establishes a process for notice and enforcement, including the removal of property. So there's a 72-hour notice requirement within this ordinance, where so you show up at an encampment, maybe it's not blocking pedestrian traffic, but it's just a normal encampment you see in a park, for example. Or maybe a park's a bad example because there's other prohibitions on camping in a park. But it's in a public space. It's not impacting vehicle traffic or ADA access, but there's a campsite there. You go in and you notice it for 72 hours. This is prohibited to be here. You come back and remove that property. That's a very similar process to what we see happening within the city of Bakersfield. So if you were to report an encampment to the city, they follow a similar rapid response process. They go out, they notice the property, and then they remove it. The second to the last bullet point here is that there's an established process for collecting and preserving removed personal property for 90 days. So that stuff gets removed from the encampment. We have an obligation to inventory that and to store that and to let people know where they can go retrieve their personal belongings for a period of 90 days. And then finally, there is a process to connect the homeless individuals to available shelter space, and the ordinance precludes enforcement of the ordinance if no such shelter space exists. And that's the result of existing case law that makes that a requirement, and I will defer to County Council to answer any questions on that issue. But just know if there's no available space for them to go, we can't enforce this ordinance and force them to go. They have to have somewhere to be able to go. So when we talk about disruption, This gives a tool that we don't currently have for our code enforcement officers, for our rangers, to go in and say, hey, you can't be lying down on the sidewalk. I think Supervisor Maggard spoke to seeing that today, if I recall correctly. So you can't do that. That behavior is prohibited. Or no, you can't set up your encampment in this public space. We don't currently have the ability to do that, so that's the type of disrupting activity that we're talking about. It's also the opportunity for the roam teams and the co-response teams to make contact with those individuals, and we have to, according to this ordinance, make that contact and try to get them connected with appropriate resources to help them. So I just wanted to make sure it was a little more detailed walkthrough of what's included in this ordinance. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to County Council to follow up, and then I'm available to answer any questions.
Good morning again, Chairman Peters, members of the board. As you've heard now from a number of us, we're before you this morning pursuant to a referral that was made by Supervisor Maggard in June. And that was to examine the LA city ordinance and figure out if there was something similar that could be done here in Kern County. Based on that referral, I created an internal office task force to review and analyze ordinances from different jurisdictions and numerous different court cases, all related to issues of homelessness, and then design an ordinance for your consideration. By working within the requirements of the Boise decision of the Ninth Circuit and the resulting settlement of that case, we have prepared a draft ordinance that is before you this morning, asking that, with what Mr. Zervis said, that it be set for a hearing and to waive the initial reading, et cetera. This ordinance is designed to provide a tool to eliminate encampments, camping or living in public places, and eliminate piles of abandoned property. But it's also a tool to assist individuals to access services, all with the goal of protecting the health and safety of individuals and the community. Deputy County Counsel Christina Olson is with me this morning, and she has additional information about the draft ordinance to share, including the legal considerations that we took into account in arriving at this document for your review. The team within my office consists of not only Christina, but includes Assistant County Counsel Kendra Graham and Deputies Brian Van Wyck and Ann Garza, who all worked tirelessly and enthusiastically in coming up with a document that we believe is legally defensible, yet serves the purposes and the goals that have been expressed by your board. So I'd like to turn it over to Christina to make just a couple of comments about how we got to where we are with this document.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As was mentioned, County Council has been working with the CAO to draft an anti-camping ordinance. And what we did to do so is we took into consideration case law from the Ninth Circuit. Well, why is that important? Because California, along with several other Western states, including Washington, Arizona, Nevada, Idaho, Alaska, and Hawaii are all located within the Ninth Circuit. So what we did was we looked at the decision in Martin v. Boise, as well as recent ordinances of jurisdictions located within the Ninth Circuit, including those in Los Angeles, Oxnard, and Las Vegas. But the key to understanding these ordinances is to look at the Boise decision in detail. The original City of Boise lawsuit was filed in 2009 on behalf of 6 homeless individuals who were accused of violating an ordinance that banned people from sleeping in public places. In September 2018, the Ninth Circuit ruled that prosecuting people for sleeping on the streets if there are no alternative locations for them to go constitutes cruel and unusual punishment under the 8th Amendment of the United States Constitution. Specifically, the Ninth Circuit held that no jurisdiction may criminalize the universal condition of being human, sitting, sleeping, or lying down, unless it has sufficient beds for its homeless population, or it offers shelter to a specific individual before commencing enforcement against that person. In 2019, the City of Boise requested that the United States Supreme Court take up its appeal, but the court declined. In February 2021, the City of Boise entered into a settlement agreement with plaintiffs, which included, among other things, a homeless outreach team to serve the community, annual training regarding enforcement, over $1.3 million in general funds for services to the homeless community, $5,000 in damages to plaintiffs, $435,000 in plaintiffs' attorney's fees, an amendment to the Boise Camping and Disorderly Conduct Ordinances to include the definition of available shelter as well as a protocol for enforcement. So, as Ms. Raison and Mr. Zervis mentioned, there are limitations that we took into consideration because we are located within the Ninth Circuit. And for that reason, we chose to look at ordinances prepared by other cities in light of the Boise decision. Specifically, we looked at the Los Angeles City Ordinance. In August 2021, the LA City Council enacted an ordinance that modified LA's anti-camping ordinance to be consistent with the city's current enforcement practices and comply with the Boise decision. In short, the ordinance prohibits sitting, sleeping, or lying down or otherwise obstructing the public right-of-way in several areas of the city. The difference between the LA ordinance and the Boise ordinance is that in LA, City Council will declare prohibited areas by resolution and post signs in those areas to provide notice. LA has taken more of a move-along approach as opposed to a penalizing approach. And to that end, enforcement of the LA ordinance will only be made after attempts to offer shelter and other services. And to date, LA has not enacted any resolutions. We also took a look at Oxnard and Las Vegas. Oxnard and Las Vegas are also cities located within the Ninth Circuit. And with regard to Oxnard and Las Vegas, both of these ordinances are similar in that they prohibit camping in certain areas of the city and provide alternative locations for people to go. It should be noted that Las Vegas does in fact have adequate shelters for their homeless population, and for that reason has the option of enforcing its ordinance as a misdemeanor. And to date, Las Vegas has cited very few people under the ordinance. And they say the reason for that, in my conversations with the city of Las Vegas, is that their ordinance has been very effective. And when I say very few people have been cited, I mean maybe 20 people. If you're wondering why we chose these specific cities, again, it's because they're located within the Ninth Circuit, and several cities within California have taken a wait and see approach because, as I mentioned, Boise was only decided in 2018. And most of these ordinances that were enacted were done so in 2019. Well, once COVID hit, there wasn't a whole lot of enforcement going on. So that's some of the background, and I'd like to talk about some of the specifics about our ordinance. So in summary, our anti-camping ordinance, as previously mentioned, is part of a multifaceted approach which provides the county with a tool to connect people with available resources and services while protecting the health, safety, and welfare of the community as a whole. There's several different sections of the ordinance, including a definition section. We felt that it was important that when addressing a task of this magnitude that we specifically define certain terms. So included within the ordinance are definitions related to camping, camping facilities, camp paraphernalia, obstructing pedestrian or vehicular traffic, public areas, available shelter, personal effects, and so forth. As far as the prohibited acts, Mr. Zervis addressed those prohibited acts, so I won't go into a whole lot of detail and repeat those as they've already been addressed. In terms of enforcement, we do have a section for that, and as was mentioned, enforcement does not take place unless there's available shelter bed space that meets the needs of the person. For example, if there was a victim of an abusive situation that was seeking shelter, a domestic violence shelter may be appropriate for that person. So what would be done in that situation, we would reach out to a domestic violence shelter to see if they were able to accommodate that particular person. The enforcement section also establishes a procedure to connect a person to resources by providing a written list of resources and transportation, and it allows for a defense if a person promptly ceases to engage in conduct after notification. And just because we are not able to enforce this ordinance in a given situation doesn't mean that we are prohibited from directing a person to available services and resources. Now that we've covered how this ordinance addresses the person, we'll switch to how it addresses a person's property. There is a section related to storage of personal property in public areas. And as far as personal property, this ordinance provides that it shall be unlawful for any person to store, use, maintain, or place personal effects or soiled materials in any public area, improved or unimproved, except as provided by the Kern County Administrative Office or as designee or pursuant to a valid license or permit. So any personal property that has been lawfully stored can be removed using a notice procedure. There is a section related to property removal, and that provides that the road commissioner and enforcement officers may remove personal property or soiled materials unlawfully stored, used, maintained, placed, or found in public areas or found in an unlawful encampment after posting a 72-hour notice. And there's been questions raised as to why notice is so important for removal. Well, the reason for that is because the United States Constitution provides for due process, which means a notice and opportunity to be heard before seizing a person's belongings. And in practical terms, what this means is that we as the county need to provide notice for people to find an alternative storage place to go. And there's also a provision for immediate removal without notice for soiled materials or personal effects which pose an imminent threat to public health or safety. And contraband or evidence of a crime is subject to law or policy and is not subject to storage provisions. And as Mr. Zervis mentioned as well, there is a procedure for removal for storage for 90 days, and any personal effects which remain unclaimed after 90 days are deemed intentionally abandoned and may be summarily abated or destroyed. We do allow for some exceptions within the ordinance. There's an exception for medical emergency, sitting on chairs or benches located on the public right-of-way, which were placed by an abutting private property owner, sitting on a sidewalk within a designated bus zone while waiting for public or private transportation, or sitting or lying in a public area or participating in a festival, rally, or parade. And we do have a penalty provision, which provides that any violation of this chapter as punishable as an infraction, an administrative penalty under Chapter 8.54 of the Kern County Ordinance Code. That penalty provision is in line with what the City of Los Angeles has done. Currently, the City of Los Angeles has a penalty provision that provides for an infraction, a fine not to exceed $250. And we do have a severability clause as well. And in summary, as I mentioned, we've drafted this ordinance in such a way to survive legal scrutiny as we've taken great pains to take into consideration the Ninth Circuit decision in Boise, as well as other cities and local jurisdictions located within the Ninth Circuit in applicable case law and statutes. The ordinance provides the community with a framework to clean up the streets by keeping people off the streets by connecting them with county resources and services. In an effort to protect the public health and safety within the county It's requested that your board enact the proposed ordinance. This concludes my presentation, and we're available to answer questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the board? Okay. Are there any comments from the public? Okay. Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank my colleagues for their commitment to trying to save those that are lost on the street and protect our community from the ravages of homelessness. It would be remiss to have anybody think that the entire board isn't committed to that effort. So thank you to my colleagues for that. For all the reasons that we stated in the previous presentation, it's my pleasure to vote in favor of, to motion that we approve this ordinance.
Second.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to verify that we are not approving the ordinance today. We are setting the hearing to come back on November 9th to consider the ordinance.
Correct. Thank you.
I still second.
Please cast your votes.
The motion is approved. All ayes.
Okay, our last item is number 47 under Public Health Services, and that is proposed adjustments to ambulance services, ambulance service rates requested by Hall Ambulance for exclusive operating areas 2, 4, 5, 8, and 9. And for that, I'll call on Public Health Director Bryn Kerrigan.
Good morning again, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I'm joined by Jeff Ferris, our EMS Program Manager. The item up for your board's consideration is a request from Hall Ambulance Service for an adjustment to their rates. On April 19th, 2005, your board established the ambulance rates process, which was subsequently amended on December 17th, 2019. The ambulance rates process establishes the guidelines and methods for ambulance rates adjustments. The process requires that ambulance rates be adjusted using one of two prescribed methods, an annual adjustment or reestablishment of a baseline. Ambulance rates can be adjusted annually using cost of living adjustments known as COLAs. However, every 5 years, ambulance rates are required to be thoroughly evaluated and a new baseline rate established. The last baseline review that Hall Ambulance Service had was in 2014, so in order to qualify for ambulance rates adjustments, a baseline review was required. In accordance with the ambulance rates process, this base rate adjustment was evaluated by a third party. The county engaged Clifton Larson Allen LLP, referred to as CLA, a certified public accountancy firm, to review the rate adjustment request for reasonableness. CLA conducted an analytical analysis of Hall Ambulance Services' financial and operational characteristics, the healthcare reimbursement environment, and the economic and demographic characteristics of the operating areas. Specifically, CLA reviewed actual expenses and revenues over the previous 3 years, the payer mix or the rate at which rates are actually paid, cost of living indexes, and operational efficiency and performance. Additionally, changes in service levels, extraordinary costs that are outside of the ambulance provider's control, and changes in labor and benefits costs were also reviewed. CLA specifically noted that salaries and benefits comprise a majority of Hall Ambulance Services' operational costs, and that increase to minimum wage has increased their operational costs by $3 million each year. Furthermore, the COVID-19 pandemic has increased Hall's supply costs and decreased ambulance unit utilization time due to labor and time-intensive COVID-19 decontamination processes, which does not have a reimbursement methodology. In conclusion of the review, CLA recommended the requested rate adjustment. Therefore, in light of the extraordinary expenses the company is incurring outside of their control, the requirement that the company undergo a baseline review in accordance with the ambulance rates process, and because of the recommendation to approve the rates by the third-party accountancy firm, it is recommended that your board approve Hall Ambulance Services, Inc.'s request for adjustment to their ambulance service rates effective October 13th, 2021 at 12:01 a.m. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, this concludes my presentation. Representatives from Hall Ambulance Service are in the audience and prepared to answer any questions your board may have.
Thank you, Ms. Kerrigan. Is there any member of the public that would like to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, are there any questions or comments from the board? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to approve? Thank you, Supervisor Scrivener. Is there a second? Please cast your votes.
The motion is approved, 4 ayes, 1 absent. Supervisor Perez.
Okay, having no more items to consider in open session, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn to closed session to consider items 56 through 58 under the County Administrative Office and items 59 through 61 under the Office of County Counsel.
So moved.
We are adjourned.